Hello and welcome to another episode of Latitude. And in this episode, we are looking at the crisis that continues to become deeper and deeper in the standoff between China and Taiwan following the visit of the Speaker of the US House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, to Taiwan, which has put into play a number of measures that China has decided to exercise to put Taiwan under pressure and signal to the international community that it might just have ominous intentions of taking the world into another conflict. Will there be a conflict? What will be the role of the United States? And how serious is China about occupying Taiwan now as compared to the situation that had arisen in 1996? And we have two informed experts who will throw light on the subject. We have the distinguished Commodore Uday Bhaskar, who is a man of many parts, commentator, analyst, strategic affairs guru to the younger generation, and of course, the director of the Society for Policy Studies, through which it holds talks and writes and produces papers on a number of security-related and policy-related issues. And we have the eminent Mr. Pramit Pal Chaudhary, who used to be earlier a very distinguished journalist, but now is the advisor to the Eurasia Group and is also journalist, come commentator, come intellectual. And I'll start with you, Commodore Bhaskar, sir. You know, it is now, as I read about a year ago, not a question of if China would get into a military confrontation over Taiwan, but perhaps when. The naval blockade of China, by China of Taiwan, to coerce the surrender of Taiwan to China's long-standing claims on the island territories. Would it lead to what China is trying to show through the war games, a military exercise that turns into an invasion?
If you look at the current situation, Maruf, I would say that we are in a crisis-like situation and an exigency that China has been trying to, in a way, avoid has actually occurred, which is that specific to the visit of the Speaker of the US House, Ms. Nancy Pelosi, you recall that there were a number of dire warnings, including one in the telephone conversation between President Joe Biden of the US and President Xi Jinping of China, where the Chinese president cautioned his US counterpart that over Taiwan, the United States should not play with fire.
Yeah.
And there was a whole subtext related to the Pelosi visit. And it got hyped in such a manner that if you remember the first 24 hours when Ms. Pelosi's flight was landing in Taiwan, till she actually left Taiwan by aircraft, the whole world was waiting with bated breath to see if China would attack Taiwan or there would be some kind of escalation. That has not happened. And if you look at the current calibrated response by China, they are now carrying out live ordnance-related exercises. They are trying to intimidate and coerce Taiwan. There is a blockade. There is a counter response by Taiwan. And while the situation is tense, my personal assessment is that President Xi Jinping is unlikely at this stage, when he has so much on his own domestic plate, including a very important party meeting where he might be looking for a third term, if not a life term, that in this interregnum, the chances that he would escalate further and make this a shooting war, I beg your pardon, to me seems a low probability. So to an extent, I'd go to the extent of saying that perhaps President Xi Jinping is on the defensive, because having hyped the Pelosi visit to this degree, in a way, he has given ammunition to the nationalists and the hard right within his own domestic constituency, Some of them on the Chinese social media have been very candid and angry. They said, why didn't you shoot her plane down? So on and so forth. But the US is there. The US military presence is there. Taiwan is not a pushover. So given all these factors, my sense is that from the current level of intimidation, moving into an actual shooting war where missiles and other ordnance would be exchanged seems to be a lower probability.
Okay, okay. So many of us would like to believe that, but this whole thing has had another spillover effect, and that is on the US policy on Taiwan. For long, there has been a policy of strategic ambiguity, and ambiguity has led to a certain degree of confusion. I believe many Asian countries and commentators have been scratching their head to try and make out what exactly is the American policy on Taiwan. And we know from the days of Jimmy Carter, the policy has stated a variety of things. Before that, there was the Senator Goldwater initiative in which they questioned that was Taiwan being abandoned by the predecessor of Mr. Carter. And subsequently, there has now been the current Taiwan crisis has again called into play a greater amount of clarity on the part of the US onto what is it going to do for Taiwan. Is it going to do another Ukraine kind of keep off, supply arms, give money, but expect Taiwan to fight its own battle? Or is the US actually going to stall Chinese efforts to blockade Taiwan and to blockade the Straits of Taiwan, which is really the place where a lot of naval activity and shipping activity takes place from it?
So understand that the original One China policy, the strategic ambiguity policy that you mentioned, was grounded on a larger strategic context, which was that the US and China were close friends. They were strategic allies, if you wish, against the Soviet Union. America saw China as perhaps not a fellow democracy, but at least a benign strategic partner. And was helped, in fact, by investing in China through the 70s, 80s, all the way up to the 90s. That's in that context, it was perfectly sound and acceptable to both countries that America basically maintained the strategic ambiguity. They would not publicly declare their support for defending Taiwan. But on the other hand, they assumed that the mainland China would never cause a serious threat to Taiwan, and the People's Republic kept saying that we want peaceful unification. In other words, we will persuade the people of Taiwan to join us on their own at some point in the future. So that was their base. That was the basic context that lay there. So there was no real basis for any problems between the two countries. And in fact, Taiwan was one of the largest investors in China itself. Mainland China and Taiwan had a remarkably strong economic relationship, even while politically and diplomatically they were in theory rivals. That strategic context has completely changed. The US and China are now openly hostile to each other. They describe each other as competitors, strategic rivals. And I think at the Shangri-La dialogue, you saw the Chinese defense officials saying that we can no longer work with the United States, that there is no basis for a strategic dialogue between the two countries. And you've seen America slowly begin to tack to a harder and harder position on Taiwan, where while they diplomatically maintain the One China policy, they are increasingly sending signals that we are prepared to defend Taiwan if China crosses a red line. Among the signals, one was that Japan announced that it would saw the defense of Taiwan as crucial to its own defense. In other words, Japan will defend Taiwan if Taiwan is invaded. And the dotted line is that Japan has a mutual defense treaty with the United States. So if Japan goes to war, the assumption is the United States would follow suit. Second, you've seen Biden now 4 times in public say that America will defend Taiwan if it is invaded. His officials then have run back and said, oh, the president was just speaking off the cuff, but the official policy of China, of the United States, remains a one China policy. But the point is, he's now said it 4 times, and he has never retracted it in public. He's never said, actually, that was a mistake. He said, let his officials do it. He has not done so himself. So I think this is as closest to America being, and now we also have finally American soldiers, for the first time since the 1970s, present on Taiwanese soil. They are training officials. They are doing, officially not there for military purposes. But you're now having a permanent military American presence, however small, on Taiwanese soil. These are all signals, in my view, by the United States to China, that while we cannot officially abandon the one China policy, what we can do is make it very clear that if you cross the red line of invading Taiwan, you cannot assume that the United States will not join into battle with you.
Yeah, well, it's a very important set of points you made. And I think there is a message to all friends and allies of America that if America doesn't come in now to hold the sovereign interests of Taiwan, then what is it that anybody can expect from America? The Quad partners, more classically so. India, which has been putting a lot of eggs in the American basket, should also watch issues very closely. And Commodore Bhaskar sir, a quick question to you. Do you think this ambiguity policy even applied to India when we looked at how things evolved after the Chinese intrusions on the LAC? Because the military diplomatic dialogue has really not gone anywhere. And China has shown that it really doesn't give a damn about the set of rules that the world swears by.
I think China is, actor now whose actions are being monitored very closely by all its principal interlocutors. And India is definitely up there among the top interlocutors along with the United States. And apart from Taiwan, in this case, there are other countries like Japan and ASEAN who are also directly impacted by China's assertiveness. We are aware of what happened in the South China Sea. ASEAN countries have been in the firing line. Ditto for Japan. Specific to Galwan 2020 and India's own policy as far as one China policy and Taiwan are concerned, I don't think India will rock the boat just now. But you're right about observing that the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, whatever be the number of talks that are being held between the military commanders, is unlikely to lead to any acceptable modus vivendi. So we are in a stalemate there. But I don't think India would do anything impulsive at this point. But for sure, it would be looking at the sequence of events in relation to what is happening. One point I want to add, Maruf, is that the Taiwanese have also claimed that they are using live ordnance. Now, if you see the geography of the Taiwan Strait and the density now of naval activity, the possibility of a mishap is reasonably high. And once that happens, a hypothetical scenario where a Chinese platform is damaged, and if there is a Galwan-like situation where there is a loss of life, then I think the chances of escalation are very, very high and very rapid. And that will change the whole grid. But as I said, there are many scenarios. Let me stop here.
Yeah, we'll come back after a break to look at some of the other issues that are also confronting us with reference to China and Taiwan, and the maritime dimension in particular, where the world is being held hostage to China's aggressive intent because a lot of trade passes through the Taiwan Straits. But that after a break. Welcome back. We are continuing to look at the tensions between China and Taiwan and how it is impacting on a variety of actors and what is China's likely course of action. We have our two distinguished guests with us. And Pramit, may I ask you to explain that this show of strength by China, will it bind the people of China together as has been said earlier on the show, that let's go and really give it to them because we waited long enough for more than 75 years? Or is it purely for consumption of the party Congress? How the critics of President Xi Jinping are going to take this? Is this going to go President Xi Jinping's way if he shows maturity and not impulsiveness in the current circumstances?
Well, it's hard to judge Chinese public opinion because there's no free press or any opinion polling there. Whatever little evidence we have indicates that the vast bulk of Chinese fully support what is called a reunification of China, bringing in Macau, Taiwan, Tibet, and Hong Kong and Arunachal Pradesh are seen as absolutely essential to ending what they call the century of humiliation of China that they experienced under the Western powers of the 19th century. It is also fundamental now to the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party, which is really not communist really in any sense of the word in terms of a social agenda that we would consider that would be recognized by, let's say, Karl Marx. But it now argues that it is the exemplar of Chinese nationalism. And finally, Xi himself, from whatever little we understand about his rise to power, the reason why he was able to defeat others like Jiang Zemin and so on to become the present leader of China was his strong advocacy that like any of the others, will be able to bring Taiwan back into China's fold, which the others actually demurred at. They said, that's a little dangerous right now. He says, no, I'll do it. And so that was supposedly one of the reasons the Politburo and the Central Committee eventually decided to go with him. So even without the party Congress, or let's put it this way, even if Xi wins the party Congress, which we fully expect, there is not going to be any change on the policy by him. This is fundamental to what he, I believe, personally believes, but also the basis of his own rise to power. He cannot take a soft line on Taiwan, and he cannot take a soft line, I would add, on Arunachal Pradesh.
Oh, very important observation. Comrade Bhaskar sir, being the naval expert that you are, let me try and get you to explain to the viewers what are the first island chain that the Chinese now are trying to go beyond? How will the blockade of the Taiwan Straits and the key ports in that area have an impact on the world economy, because a lot of trade passes through that area? And would China really resort to an amphibious operation to get to just the key island of the main Taiwan land region, or all of Taiwan? Because it's been suggested that China may be just looking at the TSMC infrastructure and some of the nano level technology factories in the other islands around Taiwan and not mainland Taiwan. Is that true?
If you packed a lot of questions towards the end, as you often do. So let me see how I can navigate this. This is the equivalent of the Maruf Raza minefield, but one at a time, not minefield, I mean question field. But I think if I move backwards, you're right about one particular aspect, which is that I think Taiwan's USP now is its real primacy as far as the chips are concerned, and the degree to which the global economy, and China also, is in a way dependent on this particular product from Taiwan. But is it possible for China to carry out a calibrated attack in such a manner that it can only seize, quote unquote, this particular manufacturing capability of Taiwan? The answer to my mind is no. Taiwan itself is aware of the value of its crown jewels, and it's not going to give them up in such a hurry, whatever be the kind of military operation that China wants to embark upon. That's the first point. Therefore, this is one of the reasons, I believe, which is also going to be a constraint as far as President Xi is concerned, in terms of what kind of a military offensive he might want to, in a way, authorize apropos Taiwan. But I think the real complex question, Maruf, is the one that you have embedded in between, which is that what is the global response going to be now that China is seeking to enforce the equivalent of a naval blockade in waters that the United States, its Quad partners, the entire Indo-Pacific community believes to be international waters where there is a right of passage? Because in the last few days, we have seen that the number of cargo ships that were embarked or moving towards Taiwan have had to reroute is now crossed, I'm told, 600. Now, that's a large number. How they are going to divert, what ports they will now finally decide upon is still, I think, being negotiated, because the global maritime community, the shipping industry, is hoping that there would be a downturn in the tension and it will be back to business as usual. That is not happening. This is where I believe the United States and the other major players, including India and Japan, who are affected directly by this blockade, as and when, in case it is extended, will have to take a call. And I think that is the tension I was trying to signal or point towards earlier on, saying that the next few days are going to be crucial in terms of how both China and Taiwan are going to engage in the maritime domain, while what is being affected is global trade. And that also, I believe, will temper or mediate the chances, the options before President Xi about the amphibious landing. But let me stop here. I think we're running out of time because the next part would be
out of
even
time,
more
sir, but I think
detailed.
you've covered a lot of ground. I think it's the purpose of the show is just to basically be a curtain raiser to larger issues where people, if interested, can go back to reading more about it, but at least the awareness has been created. And I thank you both for your wisdom as always. And forgive me, Pramat, I could have asked another question, but my producer is going to knock it off anyway. So thank you very much. And thanks for watching until the next episode. Goodbye.